Today, we're talking all about arrows, and I'm gonna help you build the most accurate, dependable, kick-ass arrow you've ever seen. Let's get into it. Now specifically, this tutorial is going to be catered toward the day 6 arrows. I've been using these for a while and I'm absolutely blown away by the durability, the quality, and the innovation that has gone into creating these arrows. So specifically, this is going to cater towards the day 6 arrow, especially their outsert system. However, this works on any arrow out there, whether it has inserts, outserts, whatever, but this is specifically for the day 6 arrow. Hands down, one of the most common questions that I get asked all the time, whether it be on Instagram or on YouTube or even in person when I'm talking to people, people want to know how I go about building arrows. So today we're going to get into the step by step, super detailed process of what I go through when I'm building my arrows. This is a super long process. It's very detail oriented. It's important to watch this whole video through and pay attention to every detail and also why we're doing what we're doing and the reasoning behind it, because I think it'll make sense as to kind of helping you understand why we take the painstaking process that we do to build these things. But once you follow this, you will have an arrow that you've never had before, as far as one that spins true, that is accurate, and flies perfectly no matter what is screwed on the other end of it here. It will fly perfectly out of your bow. If you haven't already tuned your bow, make sure to watch the other video that we have. There's a link in the description. Now, if you're just watching this video as kind of like a refresher course or trying to find the answer to one specific question, I'm going to put the timestamps down below so you can kind of fast forward through or skip ahead to the part that you want to watch specifically. But if you are, relatively new to making your own arrows, or if you need kind of a little bit of a refresher course, whatever, this is going to be a full-on tip to tail, walk you through the entire process that I go through from when I open a box of arrows all the way till they end up in my quiver getting ready to be launched at critters. So let's get into it. Before I get any of the components out of the box, or before I start even going through this process, I'm going to put my bow on a draw board and I'm going to draw back and mark on a bare arrow shaft where I want to cut it, or where in relation to the end of the riser I want the arrow to be. I personally like to have my arrow shaft end right at the front of my riser. I want to not have the broadhead behind any part of my hand while I'm at full draw, but I want to make sure that the arrow isn't any longer than it needs to be. This is important for a couple of reasons, mostly because I don't want to be shooting any more weight than I desire to. I specifically have a certain weight that I like to run. It's right around 550 grains for myself. That's my own personal setup. Everybody else's is going to be different. I like a heavy arrow. I like a good bit of front of center, and I like to make sure that the arrow is exactly what I want it to be. So I measure out to the end of my bow riser, I mark it there, and that's where I'm going to cut it. But make sure that you've measured that distance. You're also measuring the components so you know what your finished arrow length is going to be, and then measuring it about 500 more times before you start marking and cutting your arrows. I've started running these day 6 arrows for a ton of different reasons. I really like the quality of them. I like the tolerances that they have. I love the outsert system that they have. So the outsert system on these do add a little bit of length to the arrow. So not only am I factoring in the nock length, but I'm also factoring in the length of this outsert here in order to get my perfect overall arrow length. Pretty good catch, huh? I'm going to take all the components out of the box. I'm going to separate them out. I'm going to make sure I have all the right components that I need, and I'm going to weigh all of them. What I'm looking for here is to make sure that I don't have any like radical outliers as far as weight go. One thing that you will notice is that some of the components that you have, one might be a little heavier, one might be a little lighter, and you can tend to pair those up in order to get components that all pretty much weigh the same. Once you've laid out your components, you made sure you have everything you need, and you've determined, you know, the ones that might be a couple grains heavy, the ones that might be a couple grains light, and you've paired them together. I'm going to take a bare shaft out of the box and I'm going to spin it and try to figure out if there's a specific side of the arrow that might have a little bit of wobble in it compared to the center of the shaft. The reason this is important is because when you're cutting your arrow shaft down, you want to make sure you're cutting off the right part of the arrow that has a little bit of bend in it in order to leave the straightest part of the shaft. If this side down here has a little bit of a curve in it, just the way arrows are made, and this side down here is perfectly straight, well, you don't want to cut this side off and leave one side that might have a little bit of a cant in it. So it's important to spin all your arrows and mark the side of the arrow that you want to cut. Now, you don't have to cut everything off of just one side. On some arrow manufacturers that I've used in the past, I've actually needed to cut off of both sides in order to get the straightest arrow possible. On these particular Day 6 arrows, I haven't had to do that. These things run so true and so straight from the factory, I'm able to just cut one side. But it's important that when you're spinning the arrows, you're not looking at just one side or the other to mark on. Some of them you might need to cut off on both sides of the shaft in order to get the straightest part out of the middle. It also depends on how much of the shaft that you're cutting off. Me personally, with a 30+ inch draw length, I'm cutting off very little of an arrow compared to somebody who's cutting, you know, down to a 27 inch or 28 inch draw length, like my buddies Greg and Ernie. So it really depends on your draw length, and that determines how much of the arrow you're cutting off. But if you have a shorter draw length, why not cut off from both sides? You're just getting a straighter shaft in the middle. Once I've determined what side of the arrow I need to cut from, I'm now going to set up my arrow saw. I'm going to measure it about 15 more times. I really do not want to make a mistake while I'm cutting the arrow. So I measure it a bunch, I measure it again, and then I confirm that measurement one more time. Then I cut an arrow, and then I measure that again to make sure it's exactly what I thought it was going to be. You really can't measure too many times when you're cutting arrows. Once I've determined that this length is correct, that my math was right, and I finally have the correct arrow carbon to carbon length that I want, I'm going to cut all the arrows that I need. After cutting them, I'm going to square both the front end of the arrow that's going to get the outsert system, and I'm going to square off the back end of it. Now, squaring off the back end isn't super necessary, but what does it hurt? It just takes a couple extra seconds. Put it on your arrow squaring device, square it around, good to go. Now that everything is square on the arrow, the next step that we're going to take is we're going to take 80 grit sandpaper and we're going to scuff the last 3/4 of an inch of the arrow shaft. Notice I said scuff. We're not sanding, we're not destroying, we're not compromising the integrity of the arrow. All we're doing is we're scuffing up the last 3/4 of the inch of the arrow shaft. The reason that this is important is because we want to create a bunch of different surface area and texture on the tip of that carbon for the glue to get down in and really create a strong bond in there. Instead of just a smooth flat surface, it's got all this extra surface area and ripples and valleys and all that good stuff for the glue to get down in and create a super good bond. I promise if you follow these steps, you will never ever ever have an issue with an outsert pulling off. You cannot get these off if you tried. After scuffing the last 3/4 of an inch that this collar is going to cover, I now take a wire brush that's made for a .177 air rifle. Sometimes a 22 will work if you've gotten it scuffed up enough. And I'm going to push it down inside this arrow shaft, and I'm going to clean out any of the carbon dust and everything that's in there from the cutting, from the squaring, and from the sandpaper scuffing of the outside. Once I brush that out, I'm then going to take isopropyl alcohol or rubbing alcohol, and I'm going to clean both the outside and the inside of that arrow shaft. Again, anywhere that this glue is going to go, I want to make sure that I'm cleaning it off and creating the best surface area for this glue to adhere to. Now that everything's clean, scuffed, it's time to get the epoxy out. I'm going to mix the epoxy that comes with these arrows and get it ready to set. You have plenty of working time with these. There's no reason to rush. It's now the time to take your time and make sure you do everything correctly here. Now that the epoxy's mixed, we're ready to start gluing. The first thing is to take the insert and hold it by the part that goes in the arrow and just get a little bit of glue on the threads and the tip just below that. Screw it clockwise into the outsert and create one single piece. The most common issue that I see people have with these Day 6 arrows is they try to put the insert system on as two pieces. Do not do that. It's designed to all be one piece together. When you put this insert system in correctly, you will actually create a suction that will have equal glue distribution on both the inside and the outside underneath the collar, which is just superb. I've never had one of these come off in tons of animals. So dip the insert threads in a little bit of glue and then screw it clockwise into the collar. Now that you've screwed that into the collar, I take the carbon shaft itself and dip the tip of that in just a little bit of glue, and then I dip the back part of the outsert / insert system in a little bit of glue for the part that's exposed. And then I slowly put them on together while spinning clockwise. Again, it's important to always be spinning clockwise. Do not use a ton of glue. You don't need a ton of glue. Less is more in this scenario. And when you're spinning it on there, when you've done this correctly, you will feel some resistance. That's the air in there, and you're getting a solid glue distribution. And all of a sudden, you'll kind of feel it just suction right on there. Once that glue is suctioned on there, some will squirt out of the back. That's fine. As long as it's not a ton of glue, no problems here. I then will take either a Kleenex or a shop rag or whatever I'm working with that's clean, that doesn't have any other glue on it, and I'll slowly spin it around the outside of that outsert where it meets the shaft. This will create a slight bevel over the tiny little bit of area that's exposed between the carbon shaft and the outsert, and create a nice little ramp up for when you're pulling this out of targets. Now that you've got the outsert correctly glued on and you've removed the excess glue, it's now time to put it onto an arrow spinner and spin it right away. If for some reason you don't have an absolutely perfectly true spinning arrow, take the outsert and spin it just a couple degrees, clockwise. Always spin it clockwise. But once you're spinning clockwise, just real slowly, you'll find that if somehow that got on there and something wasn't square, you can still save the arrow, which is one of the really cool things about these Day 6 arrows. So just slowly spin it clockwise on here, and then spin the arrow again, and all of a sudden you'll see that one of the combinations will allow it to spin absolutely perfectly. Once that arrow is spinning true, it's good to go. I then take it over to the cardboard box that I have created before I started this entire process, where I've drilled some holes or tapped some holes into it that are exactly the diameter of these arrows, and I stick them in that box and let them dry completely vertically for 24 hours before I touch them again. Now that your arrows have been drying for 24 hours or longer, it's time to remove them from the cardboard box and turn that bare shaft in the back into a fletched one. Let's get to it. So, the first step in fletching the arrow correctly is getting the wrap on correctly. I like to set out either a mouse pad or a magazine or something that's got a little spring to it on the workshop bench that I use for fletching arrows. I then will clean the back of this arrow shaft with alcohol, peel the wrap off, lay it down on whatever cushy substance I'm going to use, square the arrow, and slowly roll it on. Once that wrap is rolled on, I then take the arrow and put it in my fletching device. Personally, I prefer to use a Bitzenberger fletching device. Everybody out there is different. You guys might have different preferences. However, whatever fletching device you use, this will work for any of them. Again, personally, I like to do a 3-fletch. I like to use the AAE Max Stealth vanes, and I like to use a nice big long white wrap so I can always check the blood on whatever critter I've shot and make sure the hit that I got was exactly as good as I thought it was. But you guys do whatever you want out there. I don't care what colors you're using. Personally, I like to use white, use pink, use orange, use blue, black, some color I don't even know about. Do you, man. Next, I take the vane that I'm going to use, I put it in my jig clamp, and then take the prep pen that I use and clean it off. Most of these prep pens are the same. You can use an AAE one, a Zane one, something cool again that I don't know about off Amazon, whatever it is. You just put it in the clamp and prep the vane. The next step, and this is the most important one, only put 3 dabs of glue on your vane. That's all you need. You put a dab on the front, a dab in the middle, and a dab on the back. Then I just take the nozzle of the glue and evenly spread it out along that vane. That's it. If you see glue coming out the side of your vane after you've clamped it on, you've used too much glue. That is no BS, no joke. 3 dabs of glue is all you need. If you've ever seen how arrows get fletched at the factory, it's literally just a misting of glue that gets sprayed on the vane before it gets applied to the carbon shaft. So I promise, 3 dabs of glue, that's all you need. So after you put your 3 dabs of glue on the vane, you're gonna press it on there. I like to let my vanes sit on the shaft for exactly 1 minute. I then pull it off, rotate, and repeat. After you've done those steps, I then put the arrow in vertically again. However, this side I have the veins sticking up. I let them dry, or sometimes I'll just leave them on my counter, but whatever I'm doing, I'm gonna let them dry for at least 12 hours before I touch them again. After that 12 hours is up, you are cleared hot to put these suckers in the air. Go shoot them at targets, make sure they're working right, get sighted in, and go kill stuff. If you follow these steps exactly, I promise you will never have an arrow that spins better, that flies better, and works better in harvesting critters. If you have any questions, leave a comment below. I hope you find this useful. Make sure to hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and keep following along as we are chasing lots of critters with lots of these arrows in the suburbs here of DC. Thanks for checking in. We'll see you guys soon. Today I'm going to help you build the absolute most accurate, most dependable, most unfiddle. Who wants to build the most accurate meat missile possible? Let's do it.